A very warm welcome to our audience today, and thank you for joining us. We are thrilled to be hosting our second ENCOR Consulting Services webinar. Today at the core, we will be continuing our conversation around all things disrupting the corporate real estate world. Our goal with these webinars is to provide compelling and unique perspectives with thought leaders to help you make a holistic and informed decision to support your corporate real estate portfolio needs. And we are exploring all facets beyond just your physical space and traditional real estate. We are looking at key pillars focused on people, process, and technology improvements that will support your efforts to make the work in your company work. Which brings us to today's discussion. Our topic for our second webinar at the core is the future of work, your playbook for an evolving environment. Today, we're going to tackle a topic that has been talked about a lot. And while it goes without saying that the definition of the office and a typical business workday has changed, the reality is a lot of businesses are still struggling. And it's not just the Fortune 500 companies, it's the small and medium-sized businesses too that are trying to determine the right workplace strategy to effectively scale as they grow their businesses in the months and the years ahead. In our webinar today, we're going to understand what innovations are supporting workplace design, workplace modalities, and the different types of resources an organization can turn to best support these ongoing changes that may affect their larger real estate portfolio. And whether your company has embraced a hybrid approach, has mandated a return to the office, or is still trying to understand what their modality is going to be, we hope today that you'll have some actionable and tangible takeaways. My name is Sarah Renaud, and I'm Vice President of Consulting at ENCOR Advisors. ENCOR is Canada's largest independent corporate real estate brokerage with a 50-year legacy, focusing on the needs of clients both within Canada and across the globe. And as a trusted advisor, we are finding numerous ways to support our clients in their varied industries to build out services and solutions that really empower them to prosper in this ever-changing market. I want to take this opportunity now to welcome and thank each of our panelists that are joining us today. They are all exceptional leaders in their space and bring an impressive track record in their respective roles as change management, workplace consulting, and technology solution advisors. Marnie Smith is a lead partner at Lighthouse 9, James Wu, CEO of InnerSpace, and Joan Didriksen, Senior Vice President and Fractional CRE here at ENCOR Advisors. Each of our panelists will be sharing actionable takeaways that you can apply to your own company's ecosystem. And in a moment, they will introduce themselves, and I look forward to their informed perspectives during our dialogue. A few administrative housekeeping items to discuss before we officially kick things off. I did want to share that our session has been previously recorded, and we will provide links to the recording for all attendees so you can rewind and listen again at your convenience. We also encourage any and all questions. Please feel free to submit questions to the chat, and our team will follow up with you directly post-webinar. Marnie, please go ahead and introduce yourself and your organization.
Thank you, Sarah. I'm so happy to be here today. My name is Marnie Smith. I'm the partner and chair of Lighthouse 9 Group. We are a management consulting firm headquartered here in Toronto, where we focus on improving organizational performance through people.
Excellent. Thank you. Joan?
Hi, everyone. As Sarah said, I'm Senior Vice President, Fractional Corporate Real Estate Solutions here at ENCOR. I don't actually come from a consulting background. I worked instead as an internal CRE for many years in a global engineering company. And I actually used to be a client of ENCOR's, and I recently joined ENCOR to bringing this innovative service which to the Canadian market, so fractional or part-time CRE.
Excellent. Thank you. And James, please go ahead.
Hi, everyone. I'm James Wu. I'm the CEO at InnerSpace. InnerSpace is a Toronto-based company. We've been around for about 10 years, and we deliver sensor-free space utilization data to our large corporate clients.
Fantastic. Thank you. All right, well, let's dive in. First question of the day. This is directed to Marnie to respond to first. What do you see as the biggest trends in this whole narrative on the future of work and the state of workplace environments? It's come under increasing scrutiny. So what are some of the challenges and opportunities that you are seeing around market imperatives, trends, and how companies are responding to this ever-changing market?
Yeah, great question, Sarah. So there's really two key challenges that we're seeing at Lighthouse 9 Group that I'd really like to comment on. The first is around growth. You know, the last few years, many businesses have been much more reactive, focusing on supply chain issues and less on really demand issues. And we have a whole cohort of talent with little experience in that aggressive growth mandates. We do a lot of work with consumer packaged goods, CPG, and in that marketplace where it is very hard to get growth through price, collaboration and innovation and creativity are paramount. So how do you bring teams together so they can collaborate and innovate more than they've ever done before? And this collaboration requires the right culture, the right environment, and the right leadership. The second challenge that we're seeing a lot is an ongoing challenge with how do we effectively engage talent in a hybrid world? The experience of talent in this hybrid world varies greatly. Some organizations and employees love it, and others are actually failing at hybrid. So hybrid work arrangements can create scheduling challenges, can create feelings of exclusion, and truly fewer opportunities to create that all-important stickiness with our talent, like that feeling of belonging that allows us to retain our talent. So again, the right culture, the right environment, and the right leadership are vital for creating that best employee experience.
Interesting, absolutely. Making sure that you've got that compelling environment and there's shared alignment between the executive team and your employees as well. Thank you for that. James, from an InnerSpace perspective, I wanted to see if you could address this question that talks about trends in the market to actually capture information to be able to measure workplace behavior and utilization of space so you can make that informed real estate decision going forward.
Yeah, happy to. You know, we spend a lot of time talking with despite being a technology solution provider, we spend a lot of time actually working hand in hand with our clients so that they get the most value out of our solution. And I think first and foremost, when we talk about trends we're hearing from them, we talked a few years ago, we were talking a lot about getting to the new normal. And if there's a new normal post-pandemic, it isn't a static thing, right? It's this very dynamic space. And so if there's a new normal that anybody has identified, it's defined by how dynamic it is. And so there's not a lot of clear patterns emerging yet with respect to how people are using the workplace today. When we look across our data, we do see some basic initial patterns emerging. We're seeing things like people, at least in the context of a hybrid workplace where there aren't mandates implemented, we're seeing people being more likely to come in for partial days versus full days, spending less than 4 hours on site versus the traditional 6 to 8 hours. And those who do come in for full days, we're seeing this 2-day frequency being emerging as a more common pattern, but certainly nothing that you would bet your life on. Across the board, regardless of those kind of patterns, we see a pretty even split between folks who are highly mobile when they're in the office versus highly static in terms of their mobility while they're in the office. And so what that's telling us and what that's inferring to our clients is that some folks are coming in for, there's this assumption that people come in to be highly interactive and highly collaborative and communicative with their colleagues. But what this data shows is that some people come in for heads down and focus work to get away from the kids, get away from the dogs and the mailmen knocking on the door. While others do come in fact, to interact and collaborate with their colleagues. So, there's some patterns that are emerging, but nothing totally really highly definable. The one thing that I do think is really important to recognize is that these are patterns that are emerging for companies that have not implemented an RTO mandate, right? Because RTO mandates have ultimately met limited success, right? It turns out that forcing people back into an office space when they are, when they have options, when they're highly skilled, when they can go elsewhere, really just results in talent churn. And so, the key focus for a lot of our clients today is figuring out how do they compete to recruit and retain talent, and they're doing so with this concerted focus on the in-office experience. Making the office a place that rather than where they force people to go, making an office a place where their highly valued talent chooses to go and chooses to come more frequently. And so trying to figure out these patterns is a key part of what our clients are trying to do today.
Excellent, thank you. Yes, being able to measure and understand how that space is actually being used or not used, to be able to create an environment that is compelling, that people want to come be a part of. That's really, really important. Thank you for that. Joan, from a fractional real estate executive perspective, what do you see the value proposition of a role like yours and how it mitigates risk and provides value as a value-added resource in-house to a company?
Thanks, Sarah. Yeah, we're seeing at ENCOR, our clients, some of them, because of their lease structure, they're actually just beginning to face some of these questions that Marnie and James have brought up, and they're really trying to figure out what to do with their real estate. Often these clients, they don't actually know where to start. They don't know what they don't know. This can create indecision. It can create delays, missteps. They might waste a lot of time or resources trying to figure out what to do. And one of the biggest things that we find is that they actually run out of time to make their decision. And this takes away their negotiating power and gives that negotiating power situation back to the landlord. So they would benefit from having a resource that helps to guide them or steward them through the process. At ENCOR, we decided to introduce this innovative, what we think to the Canadian market at least, a solution of fractional CRE, and that's basically a part-time resource which provides for clients a pay for what you need when you need it, get the specialized knowledge without the commitment to a permanent employee and the costs related to that. So we think this can help clients. It helps them, gives them an unbiased, fresh perspective. It can help them. It really can help them keep the momentum of their projects moving and get unstuck so that they can retain the control and the narrative of their project.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's fantastic. It's enabling a resource to come into an organization and immediately provide value, and taking that risk away from a company that many may not even know how to go about sourcing an individual with your skill set and background and expertise to help with the challenges they're having. So I think that's a huge value add. That's excellent. I'm going to head over now to question number 2. What are the biggest challenges that companies are facing when evaluating their current ways of working? And what would we say are the key levers to support teams that are going through change? James, I'm going to pose this question to you and to InnerSpace, and focusing on evaluating current space usage. So including the difference we hear about occupancy versus utilization. And I'm curious about the strategies that InnerSpace suggests for space management and the use of behavior data to enhance efficiency that helps to inform future decisions. So I appreciate that's a mouthful, but I was wondering if you could frame your response from that perspective.
So I think the common thread, for at least from our perspective, and we have a very specific perspective when we talk about this. The common thread for us and for our clients is the availability of or access to the right kind of data to inform the kinds of decisions that we're talking about here. So the standard bearer in the market, the KPI that people talk about all the time, I don't want to say ad nauseum, it's a very important one, but that we're talking about, perhaps overly focused upon, is occupancy. And whether they're getting that data from access control systems, whether they're getting it from their web conferencing system, the cameras in their web conferencing system, whether they've invested in and installed sensors to kind of count people. It turns out that just counting the bodies as they pass a threshold, or the number of bodies that are in a space, it isn't proving to be sufficiently informative, right? The number one question we get when we start talking with prospects who eventually turn into clients for us is, so what? I looked at the stuff, I don't know what to do with it. In the old days, meaning a few years ago, prior to the pandemic, knowing occupancy was actually more valuable, right? You could, when you knew you were approaching a max sustainable kind of average occupancy, when you knew you were approaching that threshold, in a rolling average or whatever, it meant you could act and do certain things like, divide up redesign an interior space to provide access to more, smaller meeting spaces, or more, make more granular availability of resources within your space. Or you could do things like go out and start looking for more office footprint, right? If you knew you needed it. But today, that those problems aren't that we're not trying to solve the same problems. Today, we need to be able to measure more granular behavior indoors, so that you can get the scoop on what people are actually doing, what brought them in, what engages them, what spaces they're interacting with. So occupancy alone doesn't tell people. It doesn't tell people that, right? What people today need to be able to measure are things like movement, pathways, right? How do people move through a space? Understanding how someone moves through a space can reveal value in what might otherwise be sort of written off as an underutilized space. So certainly for occupants and tenants, it speaks to how one might organize one space to help improve efficiency within the space. For owners and operators or landlords, it might identify footprint that could be repurposed to add more value to what they're doing.
Interesting.
Folks also need to be able to measure frequency and more importantly, more importantly than just frequency, but like cohorts of behavior, right? So you need to be able to go beyond just sort of anonymized heads crossing thresholds and start understanding who is using what. Because if you understand who is using what, you now have the ability to tailor the experience you're building, or the occupant experience that you're planning, at a more granular level, and really tailor it to the specific teams and the specific groups of people that are using the space, rather than designing it for this average occupant who may not actually even exist.
Interesting. Yeah, being able to have that insightful data and knowing that it's specific to that client in that space versus broader market assumptions, I think is quite critical. Thank you for that. Joan, from your perspective, can you talk about the value of an in-house resource and how they can immediately add value and provide that objective view to the business operations, whether that organization's upsizing or downsizing or going through a merger and acquisition?
So Sarah, we find that clients, this isn't surprising to anybody, they're busy running their business or their organization, and making decisions about space is really a sideline activity until it becomes really pressing, and then they need to figure out what to do. And these clients, what prevents them from moving forward, they may lack time, they may lack resources or data, as James said, they may lack knowledge about what to do, as Marnie said. And we find that one of the levers is to have someone come into the business and assist them either on a special project basis or on a regular ongoing basis, to really support them. So as an example, I'm currently working with an organization, and that organization has a kind of a newish CEO. She has limited real estate knowledge, and honestly, she has limited time because she's wearing 3 hats. I believe they have a resource gaps right now because they're recruiting staff. In this situation, they have increasing client demand. They have, which is leading to a demand for a much larger facility. But since they haven't moved for 20 to 25 years, they've lost all the institutional knowledge from the prior move. So in this situation, I'm working with them half day on-site per week and half day hybrid, and really being their lead internal person to facilitate this project to obtain a new site. For the client, what this does, this allows them to, I'm helping them define the requirements, create that internal project team structure, things like, how much should we budget for this project? What's the schedule for this project? How will this impact our business? Things that may not, would be much more detailed maybe than what you would get from a broker. I work with the brokerage team, and in this way, because I'm going once a week and I show up, I keep the project momentum moving along. So I don't know if people realize, but there's actually, when you meet with your broker, they always ask you questions like, how much space do you want? How much do you want to spend? But and you need to do a lot of internal work, either before or during or after even after you're finished with the brokerage. There's a lot of internal work. So that would be interacting with people like Marnie and James and taking that information and making decisions. So this is the role that a fractional CRE can bring, and the value is really to begin to relieve the pressure of those decision makings, because the people are so busy, and maintain the momentum of the project. I'll be transparent as well. From an ENCOR perspective, this can really help us provide better client service as well, because with me being embedded in the organization, I'm learning about the organization. That's a win-win for both parties.
Mm-hmm. No, absolutely. You get a bird's eye view on a day-to-day basis of the challenges and opportunities. And as you said, you may be privy to certain workings of the company that a broker may not see because of the fact that you're there on site on a regular basis, and you really get to embed into the essence of the company. From a remuneration standpoint, how does the fee structure work for this type of role? Is it like a brokerage where it's on a per transaction basis? Could you speak a little bit about that?
Yeah, fractional CRE is not usually like a brokerage compensation. It's usually fee for service, like it would be for a consultant. But because it's a regular coming on site, it would be like a monthly fee. But that can all be discussed. There's no real rules. It's just that it's tends to be dissimilar to the brokerage. But of course, it can be combined with the brokerage in some cases as well.
Excellent. Okay, thank you. And this question now is over to Marnie. And could you talk about leading hybrid teams and how things are different now, and what a leader needs to keep in mind when they're leading hybrid teams in this kind of new world order?
Yeah, absolutely. And I agree with James. We spent a lot of time talking about, what that new normal is going to be. And I don't think we're there yet. And for leaders, it's even more challenging because leadership is different now. It is much more individualized than it has been in the past. And leaders need to be able to adapt their style and their expectations and manage person by person versus looking at managing a whole team. We know more about people who work for us than we ever have before, like their bus schedule, their dogs' names, their daycare approach. And so that individualized leadership is critical, but it puts a lot more pressure on leaders today. And as Joan was saying, they're already very busy doing other things. So there's a couple of things as leaders that you really need to be able to focus on. One of them is being flexible and equitable because policies are different and needs are different. And the second is around finding new ways to manage for accountability. Because the normal, management by walking around, it doesn't work anymore, obviously. So specifically in hybrid, leaders need to be mindful of their team's hybrid configuration. As James was saying, some people are in office, some people are out of office, some people want to heads down work. And you need to be clear from your perspective as a leader is who is where and how can you support them so they can be effective and productive in that space, whether they're working remotely or whether they're working on site that day. So, and really being clear up front where people are will help you as a leader actually be much more involved and engaged in their day. As leaders, we also need to make sure we're understanding that there is such a thing as proximity bias. It is real. And that proximity bias can lead to the incorrect assumption that people in office are actually more productive than those outside of the office. And it's a bias that's kind of deep within us, that's sort of out of sight, out of mind perspective. And it just doesn't work anymore. And the best thing you can do is educate yourself as a leader and your teams to help prevent some of those wrong assumptions that still pervade today. The third was around paying attention to how you divvy up your day. Who are you spending time with and why? I do work with a number of leaders who fall into the trap of spending all their time with those people who happen to be in office. And it really, you need as a leader to really create that equal access and equal opportunity to connect across the hybrid. So even if you're in office, it doesn't mean you can't connect with somebody, one of your team members who's not. This can help minimize the power difference that may occur between the office and the remote workers. And the last thing I'm going to speak about is managing accountability, because that is required. If we're going to hit these growth mandates, if we're going to actually be able to grow and succeed, you need to be able to hold people accountable. So there's 3 tools that I would suggest you think about in managing in hybrid. The first are 15-minute huddles, whether you do them on a daily basis or a weekly basis. It's up to you. Our team connects every Monday morning for 20 minutes. And we share what we're working on, what we plan to accomplish that week, and what support we need from each other. And it's a great way to create that connection and help hold people accountable. The second way is around ensuring clarity on who owns the D. So those decision rights, who owns those decisions. And as a leader, if I'm able to delegate and let you know what decisions you can make, then I can hold you accountable to making those decisions and keeping things moving. So that clarity is really important. And the last tool, which is one of my favorites, is called the 15-5 report back. So it's an opportunity for you to have great line of sight to what your remote individuals or even in-office individuals are working on. It takes 15 minutes for the individual to complete and 5 minutes for you to read. And you have them complete it once a week. And what it does is it gives you great line of sight to what they thought was important, what they accomplished, not activity, but the objectives and the achievements of what they've actually accomplished. And it also gives you some great line of sight to ongoing performance reviews because you have that documentation of what people are working on and the time that they're spending. Those are my recommendations.
And those are excellent recommendations. Thank you, Marnie. What would you say out of all the things you cited, what is the most important leadership skill right now?
That's a great question. And there's a number that kind of bubble up, but I think one of them is really that willingness to grow and to embrace change yourself. And so as leaders, there are new expectations every day. There's new expectations. So how do you have that self-awareness to be able to see where you're growing as a leader, see maybe where you're gapping as a leader, and also demonstrating some of that empathy because, you know, things are still challenging for people. The world is a complex place. So having some of that empathy or EQ to be able to support your teams is really critical now.
Yes, I couldn't agree more. In a world of AI that is all around us, those soft skills and EQ has a really strong hold in the workplace that we need to hold on to, which is great. So thank you for that. All right, we are on to question number 3 now, which is really around future best practices and curating that culture for hybrid work or a full return to the office. So what are customers who are trying to determine what their workplace strategy is? What are they seeking in terms of the service providers, the service offerings that your organization provides? What are they seeking? So I'm going to frame this question first back to Marnie in terms of how do you make it valuable to come into the office and what is required to create a purpose in being present?
Yes, great question. And I know so many CEOs that are still struggling with this today, whether they have that return to office policy or not. How do you make it valuable? Years ago, you could just work away on your to-do list every day. You didn't need to plan for what you were going to do in office or what you're going to do remotely. It was very organic, but now you really do need to be planful. Being in office is not a goal unto itself. So there needs to be purpose in being physically present. So you need to think about the work in terms of both the activity you're going to do and the best location for it. As James said, if your home is really loud, maybe your heads down activity needs to be in the office. Or if you want to connect with people, maybe you need to come in more. So it's really being planful. We recently worked with a team from a financial institution where we actually defined together the work that needed to be done in office. We brainstormed together using the Gartner 4 working modes model, and we mapped the initiatives and activities by quadrant to define together what work would be best done in office and how could they do that effectively and efficiently. So we found that the team identified work requiring collaboration and creativity, obviously, to be the most valuable for that together work. And then this informed how they plan their weeks. So as a leader, you need to encourage your employees and your teams to be thinking this way. It's not just show up, I'm doing the same work whether I'm in office or at home. You need to be planful. You also need to plan for in-office bonding time. So it can't all just be heads down work in office. You need to ensure there's time to connect as individuals and as teams. There was a recent study done by Gallup of more than 100,000 business units, and they found that the business units with more bonded workers, like those that were really connected, achieve higher performance and have much lower turnover. So that in-office bonding time is it's not just a nice to have, it is a business requirement. Research also indicates that our networks have really declined substantially in the recent years. We know humans rely on social bonds to get work done. Like that network is important. So as a result, you need to be more purposeful in building those networks. Creating those collision points, those cross-department connections is paramount to both productivity and engagement. One organization we work with plans for the continuous cross-department in-person meetings to ensure those networks continue to develop. And the last thing I'd like to speak about on this is around creating purpose of being present by reinforcing the we. I think this is one of the most critical elements. I can be productive at home. I can get my to-do list done. I can spend my day on screen. But we need to focus on the we, because we need to come together to create culture. We need to onboard new talent. We need to develop our junior talent by spending time with them. So we need to reinforce the importance of collaborating and coming together. And we need to make sure that they see the value in that we, and you're speaking to it. A CEO I know takes every moment she can to reinforce the importance of the power of the we and how being present for each other makes us a better team and organization.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more, because you really build that trust with your colleagues in terms of tackling projects and challenges. And also, if you are making that effort to come into the office, you want to make sure that that work is going to be productive, effective use of everybody's time, and that you're really being laser focused on accomplishing what needs to be done. So I really appreciate how you said taking that time to plan and making sure that everyone's held accountable in terms of what those outcomes are when you do meet face to face. Thank you for that. Joan, from your work with client projects, can you outline the different services that, again, you cited it a bit earlier, but the actual projects that you're working on in terms of how you're seeing the value and the benefit of the fractional CRE role? And again, speaking to what we talked about in terms of that hybrid culture of work and helping companies to grow.
Thanks, Sarah. Yeah, I'll talk to the other type of typical case that we see, which is rather than a special project, it's really clients needing assistance at the portfolio level. And these types of clients really need a broader type of real estate support. So for example, we have clients, and very frequently they're in a rapidly expanding business, and they have a designated business leaders, and we've talked about this before, that are extremely busy. And these people actually in the past, they probably carried the real estate function. They still carry the function, but they've become so busy with the core function of the business. Well, rightfully so. Real estate's not the main goal of the business, but it has to support the activities of the business. But what happens is that they become challenged to maintain the oversight over of the real estate portfolio. So in this type of situation, the client will benefit from a fractional resource of, say, a couple of days a week. And this type of, placing the fractional resource a couple of days will allow a few things. One, it'll allow the real estate function to scale up, similar to what may have already happened with other corporate functions. So finance, HR, that type of corporate service. Frequently, real estate kind of gets left with the person that has done it for a very long time, and it doesn't get scaled up. But as we just said, that person becomes busy, and the oversight starts to lapse. As Marnie discussed about bonding, a fractional resource needs to bond with the organization as well and learn the organization. So having the person engaged with the organization for a couple of days, and it's really important at the beginning to be on site to bond and have those connections like she discussed. That's another thing that having a fractional resource on site will do. And finally, in this situation, the designated business leader, they retain the decision-making control, but they pass the oversight of the portfolio. So they've delegated, like Marnie said, and that can be a real value. The types of activities that corporate fractional real estate resource can do are, they can do the basic transaction management. So negotiate a lease, take care of your renewals, that type of thing. They can, what often happens is these organizations, it may be that the real estate has decisions have also stayed at the local business leader level. So they've got, a fair number of sites now. They've got the person at the top that's been making all the decisions, and they've got the really local decisions about what the, on the ground decisions are. And what needs to happen is that they need to create more consistency, more structure within the portfolio, and to create more efficiencies instead of everybody doing their own thing. And finally, there is really a function for the corporate, the fractional CRE, to bring more alignment between the business strategy and the real estate strategy. Sometimes those things become misaligned, and as I said before, the real estate strategy is really meant to support the business strategy, and it needs to be just tightened up a little bit. So, you know, for these types of clients, this gives them an opportunity to regain control of their real estate function without the commitment of a full-time person. And you know what, they may not be at the size at this point to need a full-time person. And again, for ENCOR, you know, we really believe this is a win-win for clients in ENCOR, because it allows us to provide better client service.
Yeah, that's excellent. Thank you for that. I appreciate that intersection between the real estate strategy and the business strategy, and really being informed about how that business is growing and evolving, and how you can help to connect the dots with that for clients at a holistic level. I think is really, really important. Thank you for that. James, from an InnerSpace standpoint, can you talk about your ecosystem of service offerings that are available on your platform, and how they support a more efficient work experience and overall workplace satisfaction that Marnie was speaking to earlier about?
Yeah, I mean, ecosystem might be overselling it. We have, you know, we are very focused on providing a fulsome data set to our clients that they can use to affect change and affect informed and data supported change in their workplace. And so, you know, when I think about the services we have, it's twofold. One, it is that data platform that allows people to collect and interpret the data, or collect and sort of ingest the data in a variety of ways, whether it's looking at a dashboard or it's programmatically connecting it into their existing systems. And it's also, you know, our experience in working across the board with our other clients to help them kind of collect insights from across the market and say, hey, look, we worked with another client of ours who had a similar problem, and here's what they did, and maybe that's going to work for you. We by no means are we. Would I say that we are, you know, like Joan in our ability to be really, really insightful, but we can at least lend a hand, right? Our primary goal is to provide the data. And when it comes to like what kind of outcomes are they achieving with this data, we work primarily with large clients. We have a Fortune 100 client who, you know, used our data to great effect. They had two buildings that they were trying to figure out whether or not they could consolidate, whether or not they could repurpose one of these buildings, because they had an assumption that they could sort of merge the people who were in building B into building A, and they wanted to figure out how to best do it. They used our data to determine that, first of all, does building A have enough space? And if so, is it the right kind of space? So it's not just about, you know, every square foot is not equal, right? Is it the right kind of space? And to understand, is it the right kind of space, meant looking at, well, what are the space types the folks in building B are using right now? And is there availability of those similar kinds of space types in building A? Because not every building is the same, right? And once they had determined, like, okay, yeah, there's enough square footage, and there's almost the right kind of square footage, they had to make some changes to you know, create some. The folks in building B were showed a clear preference for smaller focus rooms and spaces of that type. So they made some changes to building A to accommodate those folks and make sure that that this change wasn't going to negatively impact their productivity. But they actually went a step beyond that, and they looked at the data like pathways and the mobility data that I was talking about earlier, so that as they merged the two buildings, they were re-examining the entire layout, not just of the physical space, but of the organization and where people were. And they made sure that when they were doing the restack, they were putting teams that typically made use of certain kinds of resources, physical resources like spaces, close to those spaces, but also made sure that they put teams who were working together, you know, interacting with each other a lot, more frequently. They made sure that they were closer together physically, so that they could reduce that kind of in-transit downtime that people that is, you know, often fills a lot of your day that people don't even realize. And so after doing all this analysis with our data, you know, they saw a number of positive outcomes. The larger building saw over a 20% improvement in the overall space, you know, utilization of the space that they had. And it also saw a productivity boost, right, from those improved layout of reducing the amount of sort of in transit downtime that people had. And they estimated that productivity boost to be worth about 2.1 million in wages over the course of the year. And that doesn't even touch on the $1 million a year in cost savings they had from being able now to repurpose this building, or actually shed the lease of this building, and no longer have to support it and its associated operating cost. I think the most important outcome, though, so the utilization is a great thing that we measure, the value in the wages and the value in the lease savings, all of that's great. But the other unexpected outcome was that through this effort of really focusing on the space in which people are working, really focusing on the in-office experience and the intersection of that, or how the space supports that in-office experience, they observed that employees were spending about 15% more time in office than before, right? And not only that, they were coming into so not only were staying longer on site, they were coming into the office more frequently. So I talked about being able to measure frequency of visits. They're coming into the office more frequently. So what it indicated was that this effort resulted not only in the tangible, measurable ROI that we always talk about, but people choosing to come in more often because the experience they had in office was improved.
Wow, those are pretty compelling stats in terms of the improvements to the business, both in hard dollars saved, but also the experience for their employees, which also is a really measurable impact in terms of employee retention and employee satisfaction. Thank you for that. I wanted to build on your platform and understanding that it's a Wi-Fi based solution. Could you talk about from a security and privacy standpoint in terms of how you're capturing the data of people within a building or a real estate portfolio, and how privacy is protected, and then also too about Wi-Fi as a solution. So I know it's somewhat been ineffective in years past. Has it gotten better, and how has it changed in the past few years in terms of getting accuracy and credibility of the data that you capture?
Yeah, thank you for asking the question, because it is Wi-Fi has been around as a solution, as a technical solution for being able to capture certain kinds of data, space utilization data, for a long time. And historically, it has been quite inaccurate in being able to do so. So the value of the data and the value of the decisions that you can make on this somewhat vague or inaccurate data that you could get from Wi-Fi has been poor. One of the things that InnerSpace has done in the 10 years that we've existed, from a technology perspective, is figure out how do you do it better, and how do you get much higher resolution information from Wi-Fi, such that the value of the decisions that you can make with that data is vastly improved. And we have our a technological triumph that we have achieved is being able to achieve like an order of magnitude better improvement in the accuracy of the data that you can get from Wi-Fi, so that we can do what we do with our customers today. None of that means anything if we're compromising people's privacy, and if we are, if we have built a system that allows sort of Big Brother to either Big Brother or the perception of Big Brother to kind of cloud people's perception of the solution, because then nobody wants to deploy it. So it is very, very important to us that we are not only that we are protective of people's privacy, but people understand how we are protective of people's privacy and what we are actually doing, what data we're actually collecting, and what it means. So the key piece of information that allows us to do everything that we do is an identifier that is on devices, any Wi-Fi enabled device today, called a MAC address. And that MAC address is a unique address, a unique identifier for any piece of hardware globally. So the best way to think about that address, even though it is personal, it is in theory identifiable to you. The MAC address you have on your device, on your phone, is different than mine, and it's always your phone. So anytime I see it, if I knew it was associated with Sarah, I know that's Sarah. But it's similar in many ways to, say, the license plate on the back of your car, right? You drive around, your license plate is your license plate. It's entirely associated with you as an individual, but you also drive around with it and allow everybody to see it, because it's kind of one of those publicly available identifiers for you. And so in that sense, people don't worry about their license plate. And in the same way, you shouldn't really worry about your MAC address to the same degree. You could have as little concern with it as you do your license plate, right? It is just an identifier. That said, when we do capture that information, we immediately encrypt it. We immediately hash it in a way that it can't be turned back into the original data, so that our data is InnerSpace relevant alone and could never be used to identify an individual, to reverse engineer who that identifier originally came from. That's kind of the technological approach. The last thing is making sure we never identify individual behaviors, meaning we don't allow our data to be surfaced in a way that allows people to infer identity based on behavior. So I sit in my office all day. If somebody saw an anonymized identifier that indicated that somebody was in this office all day, even though there's no way of tying it personally to me, the inference is pretty clear. It's probably the guy who sits, whose office it is.
Right.
And if you can figure that out, then you can start figuring out where I go and what I do and where I spend time as an individual. And so we don't ever enable that kind of information to be accessed in our platform, and we aggregate it up into groups and patterns, and because that's really where the value lies.
Right. Yeah, aggregating the data so that you can make decisions kind of across the company versus at a very narrow point.
There's no value in knowing that I spent 15 minutes at the coffee machine in the morning. Right. The value is understanding the relevance of the coffee area to the group or to the team or to the population of people in the morning. Right.
Right. How easy is it to get your cup of Java to make you more productive and happy at work?
How do we reduce the amount of time it takes me to go and get there so that I can get my caffeine?
Right. Perfect. All right. There's been a wealth of information provided today for our audience, which is truly fantastic. I want to end with one final question to all the panelists. And if you were to give one key takeaway or piece of advice from our session today, what would that be? So I'm going to go and start with you, Joan.
You know what? There's a cost due to indecision and delays, and that cost can be significant. So don't get stuck. Reach out for help.
Excellent advice. Thank you. Marnie.
I think what I'd like to reinforce is that experience of our talent is key, and leadership needs to build their skill in leading hybrid. So train your leaders to be successful in this new era of hybrid leadership.
Perfect. Thank you for that. And how about you, James?
I think it's important to sort of recognize that this climate of change isn't going anywhere anytime soon, right? And so we need to embrace what we can from a technological perspective to be able to help capture this actionable and sort of always on data that I've been talking about. But I think it's something to recognize is that the data is a means to an end, right? The data in and of itself is valuable only if you can do something with it. The real value for whether you're a tenant or you're an operator or a landlord, the real value lays in doing something with it and implementing the changes that drive a meaningful occupant experience. So we can take you, you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make it drink. We take the horse right up to the water, and then much smarter folks than us, like Joan and Marnie, make it drink.
It's great. I love this. We've got perspective from a strategist standpoint, consulting, and the solution provider. That holistically coming together really helps to make that informed real estate decision, both in the near and long term, but more importantly, really helps to inform and support your business strategy. So again, a huge thank you to our panelists today, and stay tuned for our next webinar with At the Core and ENCOR. Thanks again.